I'm here to talk about all the books that I read this summer. This summer, I didn't read as much as I usually read in general, which is weird because I have way more time in the summer to read. I think it was a combination of a lot of different things happening in my life and then also going on vacation. So I did end up reading less, which is why I decided to not really do monthly wrap ups and just do kind of a general wrap up of my whole summer. Summer is technically not over yet. Still have more than a week of August left, but summer is over in my heart. I am so done with summer. I cannot wait for autumn to get here. I have already started my autumn TBR. So let's talk about all the books that I've read this season. The first book that I picked up this summer was The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. This is a new release. Is it from 2024, I believe? Yeah, I think it's a 2024 release. It was a big hit when it came out. A lot of people reviewed this book and had really amazing things to say about it. So I was really intrigued. This book is a bit genre blending. It's a combination of sci-fi, literary fiction, romance, has a lot of different elements that are explored, and it's really not a book that you could categorize and put into a box as to what it is. The story follows a near future in which we're able to time travel, and we are kind of experimenting a little bit with time traveling to see what happens to people who go through time travel. So we have this program in which people are brought into the future, into present future, from the past. People who are supposed to die just before their death, we bring them into the future. And we have all these different people who are assigned to help these expats deal with all the different changes, acculturate to the new environment, and just basically get them up to speed with a lot of different things that they might not be familiar with because they come from a completely different period in time. In this book, we follow a number of different expats, but the main expat that we're following is Commander Gore, who was a Victorian explorer. His ship, along with his crew, came to a doom when they were exploring something in the Arctic. I don't remember the details. So we follow him and his assigned bridge, which is the person helping him get acclimatized to today, or the today of this book. I don't even know where to start with how I feel about this book, to be honest. Interesting concepts, interesting themes developed. The reading experience of this book felt very okay. I'm just reading it, I'm getting through it. That's what it felt like to me. Kaliane Bradley is queen of words and vocabulary. I mean, every new page there's a new word that I've never heard before, but it was not done in a way that was annoying, you know, like I feel like some people or some authors, they just throw in words so that you could be like, "Oh wow, like they know words." No, it was not done like that. It was done in a very natural way. Those words were put in there because they had specific meanings that they evoked, and they were meaningful in that way. So I really liked that. So that's not something that I was really mad about. I read in some reviews some people didn't like that, but I think this was done really well in this book. This book also talked about, you know, what is it that we consider appropriate or correct in our society today? What are certain behaviors, certain words that we use or that we don't use anymore, that were used in the past, that we would consider to be rude or offensive by today's standards, that people used in the past. And then a lot of the time what happens is that people ascribe certain characteristics to a person from the past because they would have used those types of words just because that was the cultural norm at the time. Like an example of this is, I think, is it Charles Dickens, that a lot of people like to criticize that some of his books are, you know, they're denoting a bit more domestic roles for the women. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what women used to be like. Does that mean that inherently every single person that lived back then is horrible human being, a misogynist? I personally don't think so. I think that people all are living and existing in certain norms, in certain societies. To them, those things might have seemed normal. We've thankfully grown out of certain situations and certain ways of talking to people that we now deem to be not appropriate. And obviously, I'm hyper generalizing here, right? Like, there were bad people in the past. I'm just saying that just because someone lived in the past in a certain way, in a certain tradition, does not automatically make them a bad person. And this was really, really well exemplified in this book. And I really like those discussions. So there's a lot of discussions about this that come out through the relationship of Commander Gore with his bridge, because she lives according to our rules and he lives according to the social rules of his society. And I think the author is kind of arguing there's just no good or bad in either case. It's just different people being products of different societies. Like, there's things that he considers are a bit too stretched in the way that we view things today, and too many people may get upset for words that just semantically don't really have a negative connotation. But also, back in his days, there were certain things that are just kind of natural things to talk about, like sex, that back then was like a big taboo. So I think the author is essentially arguing that we can't really prescribe to people certain characteristics of being misogynistic or this, that, or the other back in the past, because they're just products of their society, and so are we. And in 100 years, people will look back at how we do certain things today and they'll be like, yikes. So yeah, I really like those discussions. The reading experience was a bit weird to me. I couldn't really feel connected to the characters too much, and towards the end, I felt like it got really thrillery, and it just got into a territory that I didn't expect. There's a huge plot twist towards the end that I thought was really, really underexplored. Like, I wasn't grasping exactly what happened or how we came to this thing to happen. The whole kind of more scientific element of how we're able to time travel is not really well developed in this book. And I think that's a very deliberate decision on the part of the author to not really want to get into that kind of level of specificity, because she was really just trying to explore some other themes. So I get that, but as a reader, there was something that was lacking there for me that I couldn't wrap my head around. Would I recommend this book? I really don't know. Like, if you want to read this book because the themes that are explored here are something that interests you, go for it. But in terms of like me recommending this book because you're going to have a grand old time, I don't think so, personally. Next, we have a little bit of a romance, Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. This book, I remember either reading parts of it or watching a series with it, something with this book from Spanish class like a decade ago. Then I saw this book in a second-hand store and I was like, I'm getting it. So I went into it with a very vague memory of this is something about recipes and a girl. I was really, really pleasantly surprised. I'm not a fan of magical realism. There's aspects of magical realism in here, but I really loved how this was done in here. This follows the story of Tita, who is the youngest daughter of a larger family, and as per her family's tradition, she's supposed to never marry and stay celibate for life so that she could take care of her mom when her mom gets to an older age where she needs constant care. So really all that Tita can do is stay in the kitchen and just kind of go about her daily duties of cooking and cleaning and doing all those womanly duties that she's supposed to do. But Tita, it's starting to feel some things for a certain man in town. At the beginning of the first chapter, we find out that actually that man is to be married to her sister Rosaura. So the book starts with Tita being absolutely heartbroken that her sister is going to marry the man of her dreams. What's really interesting in this book, where the kind of magic aspects come out, is that Tita's emotions kind of get conducted through food. So all of her emotions, everything she feels, whether that's sadness, frustration with her mom, lust, whatever it is, it gets put into the food that she's cooking, and then the people who are eating that food will internalize those emotions, and those emotions will kind of come to life through them. So it's a really funny scene, I think in the second chapter of this book, at the wedding, when Tita is super, super upset about the fact that Rosaura is, getting married to Pedro, who's the love of her life, and she's crying while she's making the dishes for the wedding. And so when people start eating those dishes, they start crying and they start thinking about their long lost love and stuff like that. As the novel goes forward, we follow Tita essentially trying to deal with and cope with all this trauma that her strict mom has put on her and just deal with her broken heart. It's a really good book, man. Like, it's such a comforting book. It's so cozy, it's so magical. It's like it deals with heavy-ish themes, but in such a lighthearted way, but also in a way that doesn't really take away from the importance of those themes and those discussions. I really loved it. I thought it was the perfect summer read, and the ending is like a warm hug. I don't even know how to explain this book, but it's so good. Let's continue a little bit the romance situation theme, and I'm going to talk about The Blue Castle by Ella Montgomery. I really love Ella Montgomery's writing, and I was really excited to pick up a book that was outside of her Anne of Green Gable collection because I'd never had before. And so this is my first kind of Ella Montgomery standalone, and I really enjoyed it. I don't think I liked it as much as Anne of Green Gable's books, but it was a really good book. We follow here Valency. She's 29 years old, and by the estimation of her large, annoying family, 29 essentially means an old rag. Like, if you're not married by the time you're 29, you're done. So Valency is not married, obviously. She, again, lives with a very strict mom and a very strict family in general. And at the beginning of the book, she finds out that she is actually dealing with a very serious heart condition, which means she only has a couple of months up to a year of living. So when she discovers this, she makes the big realization that she's never really actually lived. So she decides to say F you to everybody in her family and just go and do her thing. And we follow her take a job, doing something that she wants to do, doing something that she finds meaningful, taking care of one of her colleagues from high school who's extremely sick. And so she becomes a caretaker for that colleague. She makes friends. She starts to date this man and have a very kind of forward approach with dating him and with talking to him. Whereas before she used to be this shy, kind of quiet girl. Now she's like, you know what? I don't have that much time to be shy and quiet anymore. So if I want something, I just have to go get it. And then we just follow the rest of the story from there. I'm not going to go into much other details so that you can find everything else by yourself. I thought the pacing of the book was a bit off. Like, we spent almost 50% of the book going through the context of her family, Valency, just kind of setting the scene. And really, the second part of the book is where the story starts to move along. In the second part of the book, we get the beautiful nature descriptions that the author is very well known for. Up until that part, it was really kind of dragging along, in my opinion. So I think that the plotting should have been a bit distributed differently, maybe like 30% of setting the scene, not really 50%. But aside from that, I really liked it. It was a good summer read, a good romance. If you're a fan of cottagecore or, countryside type of books, pick this one up. Okay, let's go through some darker reads now. I also read 2 Stephen King books this summer. I wanted to get into Stephen King. I've never read any of his books before, which honestly feels like a sin. So yeah, I decided to read 2 of his earlier novels. The first one that I read was Carrie. Carrie follows Carrie, who is a 17-year-old teenager. She's heavily bullied in school, and aside from being bullied in school, she also deals with a very difficult and strict mom, which is kind of the theme going on in all of these books. What is happening? My mom is amazing. It doesn't have anything to do with me. Yeah, so she deals with a very difficult and strict mom. Her mom is crazy religious, like cult level religious. She doesn't allow her to, dress how she wants. She doesn't allow her to go out with people that she wants to meet. She doesn't allow her to interact with many people. Like, she's batshit crazy. Carrie has to deal with all of those difficulties aside from the fact that she has a difficult experience at school. And all of these frustrations essentially spark her genetic mutation that is related to her telekinetic powers. So telekinetic powers imply her being able to move stuff around with her mind. The book is very thrillery, so there's obviously kind of a culminating effect and feeling that you get through the book, where the book kind of ends on a big boom. I really enjoyed the themes that were explored here. I enjoyed the discussions about the cultish trauma. I also really liked how Stephen King took a very interesting narrative approach where the story was told to us through the perspective of a narrator who kind of gave us all the details of present day events, but also we got some details from the future where people who knew Carrie or different scientific reports on Carrie described to us what was happening back then. So that's really, really cool and interesting in the way that it was done, especially because there were certain elements that were not present in the scientific reports that were present in the real life events, or vice versa, or different nuances in the way that certain things were interpreted in the future, which is really cool to see. But overall, my biggest problem with this book was really the structure of the ending, like the actual plot of the story, because the ending was very foreshadowed throughout the whole book. So I knew essentially what was going to happen. And then you get to the end and that exact thing happens. And I just expected there to be a little bit more, or to be a little bit of a twist, or to be something that keeps me interested, because I had already known that this would happen. So the ending just felt flat for me. It's a book that is very easy and quick to read. So if you're just one like a quick thriller kick, maybe this could work for you. I think it's a very smartly written book, obviously, but just the plot itself was a bit of a letdown for me. The next book that I picked up, also from Stephen King, was Misery. This one is a very interesting premise. We follow an author who has a car crash in the middle of a snowstorm. So it's a very kind of thrillery, snowy atmosphere. But essentially, the author gets stuck in a car accident, and he heavily injures his feet, so he cannot leave the car. And he gets rescued from the car, a woman whom he finds out a little bit later is one of his biggest fans. Unfortunately for him, this woman is absolutely psychotic. She decides to trap him into her house. On a positive note is the fact that she used to be a nurse, so she has some medicine around the house that could help him at least with his pain. But obviously it's not helpful to actually treat the wounds that he has. So although he's in less pain when he receives the medication, he's just as heavily wounded and he cannot use his feet. So he's stuck there for months on end because she won't let him leave. And things just get crazier and crazier as you go through the book. She also requests of him to write a new novel as part of a series that she really loves. Like there's a particular series that he writes that she loves, which is called Misery, and she wants him to write more stories in that particular series. So he's stuck there, trying to write, trying to escape, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And I feel like in this book, after having read Carrie, I could definitely tell how Stephen King worked through some of the plotting issues that were present in Carrie, because this one felt so much better plotted and structured in terms of the plotting. Like you could really feel that kind of crescendo of thrill and like suspense as the book progresses. And then the ending was crazy. It was a really good ending. I really enjoyed the ending. I thought it was really well done, and it spoke a lot to the themes in the book. Cool themes explored about, the writing process that he was discussing when he was talking about how he was writing his book. I wasn't like obsessed with it, but I think that also just speaks more to me not being a huge thriller / horror reader. That's not really my genre, but it was a better book than Carrie for sure in my estimation. Okay, let's talk about a fantasy book. I think it's the only fantasy that I read this summer, and that is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I wanted to get to this book for such a while. I have finished Mistborn and a couple of other shorter works from his, and I knew that Elantris, I wanted it to be my next big read from him, and I'm so excited that I finally read it. It was such a good book. He just never misses, just Brandon Sanderson just knocks them out of the park all the time. This is a very interesting story, very creative as usual, where we follow Prince Rauden, who at the beginning of the book gets cursed by something called the Shaod. The Shaod is this very mysterious event that happens to some people where they get essentially cursed to become kind of like zombie-like. I don't know how to explain it. It's like get completely disfigured. They just can no longer live in society as human beings. And when that happens to a person, they get thrown into Elantris. Elantris used to be the big city in the kingdom. Like it used to be the it city. People that used to live in Elantris used to be godlike. They had this beautiful shine coming through them. They were very powerful. They had magic. They were beautiful. Like it was just this elite city. But when the Shawood hit, all the people living in Elantris started getting sick and getting this zombie-like appearance. And then more and more people throughout the kingdom starting getting these hits kind of randomly, seemingly. And when that would happen to a random person, they would get thrown into Elantris. And so we follow Prince Rauden, who goes to Elantris, who's thrown in there, and he's trying to make sense of Elantris. He's trying to make sense of what happened to him. While he's there, he sees a lot of suffering, a lot of kind of despair, a lot of people just kind of living off very intense hunger because they don't have much food. And so we follow Prince Rauden trying to start to establish some sort of government, if you want to call it like that, like some sort of system in the city to make it a city that is productive, a city in which people don't just survive but actually live for a purpose. And it's really interesting to see all those details of how a new civilization gets to come to life, if that makes sense. All the while, he's also trying to gain some information and knowledge on what actually happened to them and is there even a way to reverse it. We also follow outside of Elantris what happens in the city of Kae, which is a city right outside Elantris, the first city that we see. We follow his betrothed, who is legally his wife, that he's never actually met in person yet, called Serene. I also saw some people pronounce it Serene, but I'm gonna call her Serene. That's how it's in my brain since I read the book. So Serene is this badass girl. She is very tall. She's very muscular. She's badass in every sense of the word. And she goes to Kae and she has to live as a widow because she thinks that Rauden is actually dead. Everyone in the city thinks he's dead. And we follow her trying to investigate a little bit what happened to him because his death is very mysterious, obviously, since we don't have a body or anything like that, because he's actually still alive. Kind of trying to investigate what happened to him. And meanwhile, she gets acquainted with the different religious bodies in the city that have, a lot of influence on the power of the city. It's such a good book. It's such a good story. I love it. There's some magical elements that you get to uncover as the book goes forward. What I noticed, because I think this is his first book, and I remember before picking it up, some people would say there's certain elements in this book that you could tell are a little bit more amateurish because it's his first book. When I read it, I couldn't really tell that was the case, but then after I had read it, I'm like, okay, I see what people mean. The book is amazing, all like just amazing, but I would say the pacing is a little off, similar to what I said about the Blue Castle. 50% to 60% through the book, we're still setting the tone, we're still kind of explaining, we're going through the motions. Nothing really picks up, nothing really happens that much. We can start to see some internal conflicts kind of starting, but it's not really, going towards the end. We can't really see yet what is happening at the core. And we only get to see that in the second part of the book. So that is like, the one thing that I could say, okay, I could see that the pacing of the plot is a bit off, but I still think it's a really good book. Just read it. So the last book that I finished this summer is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This follows the story of Emma, who is in her mid-20s. She's happily married, and on her anniversary date with her husband has to leave for a work trip, and in that work trip his plane crashes and he is dead. He dies. Following these events, Emma is going through obviously a very tumultuous emotional state. She's trying to cope with the loss of her husband, and she decides to move back to her hometown and starts a little bit to find herself through different things that prior to those events she didn't really gravitate towards. So an example of that is the fact that her parents own a bookshop, and all of her childhood, all of her teenage years, she didn't really want to be a part of that. She didn't want to, work there. She didn't want to continue the legacy in the bookstore. But when she decides to move back to her hometown, she starts to see the spark in her heart for books and for the bookstore and for continuing this legacy of her family. As she's moving back a couple of years after the passing of her husband, she meets a new guy who is actually an old friend from high school, and she rekindles that friendship. But more than that, they actually fall in love and they get engaged. When they are engaged, she gets a phone call that Jesse, her estranged husband, is actually alive and he's coming back to see her and to see his family. So when he gets back, Emma has to now navigate this very weird situation in which she's still like legally married to her husband who's now back, but she's also engaged to someone else. Like, what the hell is happening? So here's what I'll say about this book. Okay, this is a very fast read. It's a very good read. Like, Taylor Jenkins Reid is so good at throwing you inside of a situation and making you feel like you're part of the story. I did feel that certain elements of this book were rushed and unexplained and just felt off. Emma's decisions towards the end of the book felt so rushed. She went through these difficult, conflicting emotions for the great majority of the book for her to get at the end and in a matter of a couple of seconds be like, "Oh, I have an epiphany. I know who I'm gonna choose." It just felt very rushed to me. It felt like I didn't quite see any progression in her character development for her to get there. I also knew who she was gonna choose because it was quite obvious to me as a reader. I don't want to say too much, but like the situation and the way things were described about her character and whatnot, I already knew who she was going to choose at the end. I already knew kind of what the book would be like at the end, like what would be kind of the big theme going on when she would make that choice. So I already knew that. Getting to the end, I didn't feel like there was any development from the part of the author to get Emma there as well. I couldn't really connect to Emma and I couldn't really understand her conflicting emotions because it was not really believable to me. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's also the thing of like, okay, I'm the outsider and I'm judging this from the outside, whereas if you're in that situation, maybe it's more difficult for you to kind of grasp your emotions and really see clearly everything. That's also possible. But aside from that, I still think it's a very good book. Like, if you're not going to sit there and really scrutinize the details of how believable this is a good book and I would recommend it. Okay, the last book that I'm reading this summer, still getting through it, still have not finished it, trying my best to finish it by September, but at this point I don't think I will. It's The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. As you can see, very slow progress. I think I'm okay with it being a slower progress than me rushing through it. It's a very heavy book to get through. The language is very heavy. I find this much more difficult to read than Crime and Punishment from him. I think it's also the story is just not as intriguing to me as Crime and Punishment was, but I think I'm still quite at the beginning, so maybe like things haven't picked up yet and I'm still really just getting the introduction of the story and the characters. But essentially we're following three brothers, three very different brothers, and their father, who is, the patriarch of the family. He had two wives. Both of them are dead at this point, and as a result of having those two wives, he had these three sons. It's a book that deals a lot with religion, a lot with morality. Through all of these different sons that he has, a lot of themes are exemplified. Like, for example, the theme of religion is really exemplified through the character of Alyosha because he is a monk, but also a little bit through the character of Ivan because Ivan is this intellectual of the story, and he has certain reservations about religion. At the point of where I'm at in the book, the thing that interests me the most and that I'm most drawn towards is the character of the father, who pisses me off so much. I hate this man. It's so crazy how Dostoevsky has a way with words that just make a character just exist in time and space. I know this man. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just I can see this man and I know him in real life. It feels like I've met this person before and I just hate him so much. He is the most despicable character. He's so concerned about money all the time. It's so selfish. He's so self-centered. He is so insecure to the point where everything he does, he kind of performs for someone just so that he can get people to pay attention to him. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's just the way it's done. It's like absolutely masterful. It's crazy how much I can hate a character that does not exist. Anyway, I'm gonna reserve more of my thoughts for a full vlog that I'm doing on this, but yeah, I'm hoping to be able to finish this by the end of August. Probably not, but yeah, that's the last book that I picked up this summer. I already started other books, but they are considered for my autumn TBR, so I'll discuss those at a later point in time when we're going to get into more autumny content, which I'm so excited about. I'm so happy summer is over and I cannot wait for fall. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got some recommendations, or if you have anything to share about any of these books, if you've read them before, please do in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.